is 7-6 selected. Freiburg goes for the kill. He's going to pick it up. If just exists survives, he's going to win the round. There's no time. Oh my God, Freiburg, are you kidding me? Because of it, Freiburg is going to win.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Alphadraft by the Numbers. It is of course the CSGO edition with your host Richard Lewis, that's me, and of course the world's leading CSGO analyst and thinker of thoughts, Duncan Thorin Shields. How are you doing today, brother? You good?
Yeah, I'm all right. Got a little bit of rest after the CEVO land, so we're here finally.
Right. Well, first question for the show is, right, what the fuck happened in like the last 2 or 3 hours of that night out in CEVO? Because I woke up face down in my hotel room, fully dressed with my shoes.
Well, I mean, obviously, I can't reveal any sort of illegal extracurricular activities that might have happened, Richard. But let's just say a good time was had by all. So Scoots was there, and he had a devilish look in his eye, and that's all I'm at liberty to say. All I know is you and Henry G were just both unconscious in a room surrounded by men from the casting industry for a few hours at least. And that's all that we'll ever know about that.
So do I need to worry about some video surfacing like in the not too distant future? Is that a thing?
The thing is, like, I don't know about other people, but in general, the only thing I ever normally use, I don't usually fuck with people, but I do sometimes take photos. And in this case, just because it would be really BM because of the circumstances, all I did was just take a picture of Henry while he was like passed out asleep. And I didn't even tweet it. I just sent it to him as a direct message, like, dead now, of course. That's what it said. Like, I'll send you on like Twitter later.
Yeah, right. Like, literally, man, I'm amazed I even made my flight. I was a fucking state. So they do big shots in America, don't they? Not like our shots.
Listen, mate, I know. When you here's the thing: in England, if you order a shot of tequila, the glass is about like that big. You know, it's like a little glass. It's like a double or triple the size in America. But that's not really an excuse, is it, Rich?
No, but yeah, did pound a few of those. So yeah, great time was had by all, must be said. Obviously, we'll talk about CEVO in a little bit, but MLG did look after us very well. In fact, you know, food was there. I mean, you had a bit of an issue with some of the fries being cold, obviously, but one of your big trigger points: lights in your eyes, cold fries. Can't remember what the other third one is with you. I don't know. Who knows? But anyway, they did look after us in general. It was a great event to work. So, and of course, you get your check right at the end.
I'll tell you what my third one is, Richard. My third trigger point. Here it is. It's people who come into green rooms and tell you on 15 rounds, I need you at the desk now. Because every single time I tell them you don't, that's not even how the game works. It's not automatically implied that the team on 15 will win the game. And obviously, we've seen games where the losing team tore off 10 rounds, it went overtime. So I always tell them, I'm not going to that desk till that score hits 16. I'll get the fuck out.
Yeah, and they love you for it, mate. They love working with you because of that.
Every time they're just like, it's just my job, mate. I'm like, get the fuck out.
Everyone says, have you noticed how everyone says that to you now? Like, I'm just doing my job. Don't get the fuck out my face all the time. You want to be careful because with some of the news that's going on that we're going to get into, maybe employment might be a hard thing to come by. So should we do the news? Let's do the news. Do you want to start with all the fucking roster shuffles that have gone on today? So
yeah, let's do it.
Obviously, we were privy to some of this before it happened. For example, we knew Pronax was leaving Fnatic. We heard about this over in CEVO, but I didn't think it would be appropriate to publish it because it was like, you know, just a private, you know, conversation with people tossing a few beers back and stuff. So, I mean, this is the first thing. Pronax leaves Fnatic, which is a huge move. We've talked about the end of the Fnatic era. Pronax is the brains in the outfit, the in-game tactician, the in-game leader, the captain. But apparently, the relationship between him and some other players was becoming a bit strained. Apparently, Olafmeister and him weren't getting along as particularly well as they could do, and also as well with the recent slump in results, I think that the remaining 4 players perhaps felt a difference in direction was important. But I can't help but feel that this might be a potentially dangerous move, because say what you will about Pronax, I think, first of all, he'd actually improved his individual level of performance and was starting to get very good statistics when it came to clutching rounds and actually making more of an impact on the scoreboard than he did, say, 12 months ago. But you cannot dispute what a great in-game tactician this guy is. So what do you think about this? Is this a step in the right direction for fixing Fnatic's problems?
I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, one big problem, I think, is that it's obviously a big gamble. Like, even though at the moment Fnatic's not winning tournaments, we know they're not terrible. I mean, even at the major, they managed to, like, fairly handedly win a map off Envious, who won the whole tournament. So they're still good, but obviously something has changed with that lineup where at the moment it doesn't look like they're going to return to being the best team in the world. So on that side, the gamble of trying to change players is a good thing. The downside is we can't be sure that this change will be the one that works. Now, in a way, I could see how it could, because to me, the main problems, I've kind of referenced this before, is that I thought that JW, for example, has fallen off a lot over the year. Yeah. They've had issues in terms of, like, yeah, Flash has been super sick for a while, but like it's mainly just been certain months where he was really good. So I felt like some of their fragging fell off when you compared some of the beast teams that are on top at the moment. So it's true, Dennis brings more fragging and he's a different type of in-game leader. But I also suspect, like what you were saying there about possible disagreements between players, I actually suspect that not only was it that they had issues with Pronax and they've started losing, but it definitely helped the transition that Dennis within Kingwin and then G2 has been going up and up and up and up. And now he's just almost made the Valence major, because if he already has the history with Olafmeister, which he does from LGB, that kind of makes sense as to why then Olaf's like, right, I'm going to bring in my boy from LGB and, you know, we'll do it that way because he can add some more fragging. So I think if you combine all the circumstances, it was like the right move for Fnatic, at least, probably.
Now, the other question, of course, is where does Pronax go from here? Already starting to hear rumors that Pronax is looking to put a team together with some old familiar faces. A lot of people saying him and Devilwalk might pair up. And this goes back to, they obviously played together representing Sweden out in Serbia. And both had their moments individually. We know Exist is somebody who was in that team. There's obviously talk that the NIP roster is going to get scattered to the 4 wins. So where do we think Pronax is going to end up? What kind of team do you think he's going to put together? I mean, again, the rumors that are kind of circulating today are, you know, what people have been messaging me and sort of insinuating is that we could see Pyth involved, we could see Devilwalk involved, that Pronax isn't going to take a break, that he is going to try and put together a team out of these kind of Swedish leftovers and make a good go of it. Do you think that's viable, something we might see?
I think it could happen. That's certainly what it sounds like is the ambience of it. Like, I mean, if you're going to leave Fnatic, even in its like slightly degraded state, still a team that potentially can win events, then you better be doing it either because you've got a super sick lineup planned somewhere else, or as not an entirely unreasonable option. If you're just tired of competing at the top level, you want to play with some friends or some people you like and try and make the best of what you can there, that's an option too, I'm certain. The problem is the lineup you were just citing there, which is essentially similar to what they had at the World Championship, would actually be a dog shit lineup. Like, I don't think that lineup would ever do a deep run in a big tournament. It would just be people who are friends. Okay, do it if you want, but like,
well, not even if they added a bit of firepower to it, you know, they could get Twist
like
in
who?
there.
Who's available? Okay, he's one. Who else? There's not many people left. That's the problem, you know.
Well, I mean,
players,
let's not forget. I mean, from what we're hearing about the NIP disintegration, Freiburg and Forest are a pair, apparently. So, I mean, what if you have Devilwalk, Pronax, let's say Pyth in there at Forest and Freiburg? Is that not a good lineup? Is that not a good roster?
That's an okay lineup. Like, the problem with that lineup is, first of all, let's be real. If Devilwalk isn't the in-game leader, I mean, I don't think he can be in a top team. Like, as an actual player, he's not that good. When he was at the top level, when Fnatic won that major, was way back in terms of the era of like the meta game of how you put together teams. Like, since then, there's no team that's had a player that's as weak a fragger as Devilwalk and that's been an elite level team in the world. Nowadays, you have to look at the lineups of fucking Envious and TSM. You have to have amazing players in your team now, just at all positions. So I'm not sure Devilwalk can be in a top team. Freiburg obviously has fallen off a cliff. So I mean, he'd have to like revitalize his career in this new team if he's going to come back. Forrest's fine, still a good player. Twist is a good player, but has some sort of weird mental problem that makes him not want to play in top teams. Don't know why that is. And then who else? And then Pronax himself, obviously absolutely fine. Frag's perfectly fine for an in-game leader. So I guess that would be an okay team. But the problem is for me, that would be a team that would be like 8th best in the world or something. You know, I can't really see that would be like a world beater type team or one that's going to win big events.
I mean, a lot of people are talking about Schneider here, and I obviously don't want to get into it, but let's just put a point on that and just say that I don't think you're going to see Schneider in a lineup that's going to challenge internationally. I think eventually it's going to come tumbling out what happened in Dignitas, and I think once that's out there, I think you know, the idea of him being in a lineup like this, who would want to go and compete internationally and be the very best, it just can't happen. And you know, it's not for me to go into the specifics.
Well, especially since, like I've said on past shows, basically the reason that was communicated to me as to why he was kicked from Fnatic in the first place was something along the lines of like not being as dedicated as the others, not wanting to like boot camp and this sort of stuff. So, unfortunately, that has nothing to do with your skill, but as soon as those sorts of rumors get around in any esport, you better be like some god tier player, or those you just won't make it, unfortunately. Because what people will think is, right, well, I've got you're a good player, but I've got another guy who's, you know, like a similarly good player, but he doesn't have those sorts of problems. So people will always choose what seems like the less difficult option, like the path of less resistance, as it were.
Yeah. So let's talk about the replacement, Dennis. Dennis comes in after a very successful G2 esports run at the last major, and I was surprised to see G2 esports making changes at all after everything that happened. Now, do we feel he is an adequate replacement? Yes, he has previous with Olaf Meister and Synergy there. Is that going to be enough to put Fnatic back in the top spot?
I mean, the thing that's kind of unfair about trying to judge it is it reminds me of when we were all trying to judge how Alu was comparing in NIP against Makalele. Because the reason why that's never going to be a fair discussion is that if you look at it, in reality, the Makalele NIP competes against a different era of teams against the Alu NIP. You know, it's slightly different teams. They've evolved a little bit. The map pool's changed. So you can never 100% know. You're just trying to sort of compare them directly with your eyes, so you can get a sense for it. So likewise, the thing is, Dennis individually is a much, much better player than Pronax. As an in-game leader, the thing is, his style of in-game leading when he was in LGB was actually just like a pure run and gun style. It wasn't very advanced. He had some simple tactics, but they were like all quite fast tactics, and they were all based on having good fraggers. Now, obviously in Fnatic, they've got some sick fraggers, so maybe that could be the key to like a new style of playing in Fnatic. But put it this way, I don't think you can just put him in Fnatic and say, do the same shit Pronax did. We'll all play the same way and the team will be as good. Like, I actually think it wouldn't be. I think if anything, you have to try and make this a clean break and make this a new Fnatic and think, right, well, we've still got Crims, we've still got Olaf Meister, we've still got 6 players, but we have to like reinvent ourselves, because at the moment, none of like the player that if I wanted to remove Fnatic and make them world class tomorrow, the player I removed wouldn't be Pronax. You know, that he's not the problem, exactly. as it were. So the current Fnatic can't remain as it was anyway. You know, so I think that's why it kind of makes sense to gamble here on a player that's obviously quite viable.
I mean, obviously we know Dennis can do this, but like obviously this isn't a like for like replacement. Do you think we'll see Vugo playing more of a role? Because, they're talking about Flusher being an in-game leader. We watched PGL, I think it was the tournament where Flusher called. Is that right? Yeah. Was it PGL? Yep. And Flusher had a terrible tournament. And, as in he was dead weight, which is, you can't say that about Flusher usually. He's always one of the more explosive players, a guy that does all these ridiculous clutches and makes all these kills, seems to think really intelligently about the game, which is great quality for an in-game leader to have. But ultimately, all the evidence points to him not being able to have an individual level of performance while calling for his team. So, I mean, is this dangerous?
I mean, I actually think that that's an area where I'm not sure yet, but I get the sense that that might actually clear things up, because I did notice that during the Vugo era is when Fnatic actually, I think, became better on T sides. Like, I think they actually improved something there. And then also in the latter days when there were these rumors that Pronax would leave, one of the reasons people were citing was that, you know, like, presumably because the results weren't so good, that people weren't listening to him as much, or they thought like his style of leading wasn't as good anymore, or maybe even his tactics weren't as good. So in a way, if they make use of the coach, I could see it where if they just have someone like Dennis be a loose in-game leader, and the coach in theory feeds them more stuff that he's seeing behind them, maybe that could be the approach. Because in general, I don't think this team has to be super tactical. Like, I never thought of the Fnatic team anyway as like, they were never like an execute team. So I always thought there was some play there. So if I was them, I'd try and read it that way and say, right, let's just try this new approach. And I mean, essentially we've recruited for skill, so let's play off our skill, you know?
I mean, there was also a lot of thinking that, you know, I mean, I did hear from other players that Vugo's contributions like super overrated. That's like something that, you know, has been almost invented by the scene, by the community, by the media. And in fact, you know, those famous timeouts, it was Pronax that was calling those, not Vugo, and things like this. And there was a lot of people saying, actually, people are going to find out now that Vugo, you know, Pronax was the brains. Vugo was making a very limited contribution. And I have no idea. Obviously, I'm not in the team. That's one thing I don't think I could really verify. But it did seem to be a large sentiment from a lot of the players once this move was announced, kind of privately. They were saying, actually, that's a huge loss for Fnatic because Pronax does all of those things.
It's true. One thing Pronax has always been amazing at is like reading the game on T side mid round and then changing things up. He's always been very good at like improvisation like that. But I remember actually at the Cologne major, the one they won after the VP comeback, and then the Envious ones where it was all predicated on these crazy timeouts. I actually remember it was at that tournament I made a tweet that said something like, you know, Pronax just showed like he's worth whatever salary they pay him for those timeouts. And actually Vugo himself tweeted me and said like, actually I made those timeouts or something. So, I mean, people are welcome to call him a liar if so, but I mean, as far as I can see, he doesn't really have any reason to lie. I guess he could just self-aggrandization, but I also, the other issue I have with that is, I'm sure you've noticed this, but in every single game that involves coaching in the West, people say the same thing about everyone. Like, I'm not going to say who, but in League of Legends, there are at least 2 or 3 coaches who have been mega praised in public and had fucking articles and features done about them. And then the players from those teams, either when the guy leaves or while he's still there, just say, oh, that guy does nothing, or he does very minimal, or he does just X, and we do YZ and ABC, you know, like, in general, I think it's just a trend in that sense. So that will be interesting. I agree. I mean, that's essentially something that, in a way, we'll find out in the future just by how good their T side is and how good their tactics are. Obviously, we'll never 100% know, because to really know, you'd have to literally get Pronax, keep him in the team, not have him call, and just have Vugo do it. So I guess it's a bit unfair in that sense. Like, I don't want to take it away from Pronax and say that if it's say Fnatic now becomes the best T-side team in the world and they become some amazing thing, that's not purely Dennis. It's probably not purely Vugo. It doesn't mean Pronax are shit, but it'll just be a different approach. But I think there's probably is something to that. That's probably an answer we can find out as Fnatic goes on.
I think that all really stems from the fact everyone's so desperate to want it to be like real sports. We all want like Mourinho type, you know, coaches who are tactical masterminds and big personalities. So whenever a coach does particularly well, even though we have no real way of quantifying their input, everybody always seems to go really over the top, especially in the West.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I've never really got that. I mean, seems to be almost like a bit of wishful thinking on behalf of the fans.
I mean, just look in League of Legends, right? Okay, so the team that's the most successful in history is SK Telecom. Now, here's the thing. Everyone who writes about their coach writes, you know, he's obviously the best coach ever. He's a genius. He knows exactly what he's doing. But here's the interesting thing. He has the best player ever, and by a large margin. So people ignore that, like, well, that helps you, doesn't it? I mean, I'm not saying that. The key point there is none of us as Westerners even know what he does. Like, for all we know, he's just basic practice and gives him little we don't know what he's doing. Is he crafting the way the best player plays? Does the best player take a lot of control? We have no idea what's going on there. So it is like a very complicated thing to wade into. And people don't just wade in there. They come in and they just say, oh, this guy's a genius. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. This guy's doing a great job. When really we know almost fuck all.
I mean, you know, I'm inclined to kind of lean more towards that. Like, I think having the best players helped. I mean, I was guilty of talking about this. I know when Vugo came in for Devil Walk, we used to question, will this be a backward step for Fnatic? Can we, Devil Work obviously made like this big contribution, and then it turned out it was just pretty much business as usual, or if not, actually the team got better. So it was really hard to kind of even quantify a coach's input without being directly involved. Generally, it's my experience, players will always go, yeah, coaches don't do all that much. But then again, players obviously want to take credit for what they do in games. So it's not necessarily a reliable source. I guess time will tell about that one. Now, one of the standout players at the CEVO event we were just at, and of course at the major, despite his team not faring particularly well in either of those, was aizy from Team Dignitas. And he finally got that move. I mean, you've been joking about this all the time. Like, why y'all like, help me, man? Like, because he's just been dropping bodies, like 60 kills in 2 games at the major, carried that form on at CEVO, just absolute ridiculous numbers. Like he's at the peak.
Oh, Richard, don't worry. At the after party at CEVO, I was even like saying to the Dignitas team, like, this poor bastard's over here. You're all on his back. He's like, why y'all like, help me, man? And they were all just like doing that really awkward laughter, like, ha ha, we hate you. We fucking hate you.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, I even said to him as well, like, I was like, dude, like, whatever happens, like, you're gonna be all right, man. Like, you must be one of the most desired players to buy right now. Like, you're gonna have options, like, whatever happens. Because obviously the Dignitas guys are a little bit downbeat. I've known those guys a long time, but I guess by that point the deal probably had already been struck. So that probably has explained why he was grinning like a Cheshire cat. So I'm real happy for him. He definitely deserves this move to G2 Esports, where he's going to be joining, all these big fan favorites. And now the level of firepower in that team, it seems absolutely ridiculous. I mean, obviously, we've talked about teams in the past and how they can't succeed just by adding firepower alone. But it's really hard now to kind of play down just, with Rain in there who can clutch, and Jacob in there. Fox came up big at the last major. Makalele clutched all those rounds. I honestly I feel like I'm saying this almost every time we talk about it, but I feel this again is an improvement for G2 Esports. And I think now they really are a team that people cannot underestimate and people have to take seriously. What do you think of this move?
Yeah, I think it's an upgrade, like especially because the key thing in G2 was they actually always used to stress that in some way Dennis wasn't like the in-game leader. Like, I mean, they tried like Legia or whatever that guy's name was, and previously they had the Emilio guy. So it's not like he was like some dedicated in-game leader anyway. In terms of fragging, he was really good, but he wasn't as good as aizy's at the moment. Like, the thing with Dennis is he's still a work in progress. You can see him getting better and better as events go by. He'll have big rounds, but he's not like the main carry player of the team. And so adding in, the key thing that I think is good about adding in aizy is at the moment, aizy's super reliable. He's going to go beast mode. And at the moment, you just got Jacob, but Jacob's only had the one incredible tournament. So if he drops off at all,
it was the major.
In theory, sure, but in theory, if he doesn't play like that every time, you've already upgraded in skill anyway. So it's not like it's do or die for him. So I think the spread of talent in the team's pretty good at the moment.
Yeah,
I have to say, though, there's a part of me does think eventually, somehow, they will eventually remove Fox one day. I don't know when it'll be, but I think it eventually will happen. Now, spam the chat. Come on, Corralio. Come on, boys. We know you're out there.
No, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because just to pick up on that point, first of all, I think they'd be crazy to remove Fox at this stage. They've rode the rough patch. There was a time where Fox was the weakest player on the team by some distance. And I think what was probably not helping him was how nervous he would have been about being removed. Because, if that happens, where does he go? If he's not in this G2 Esports lineup, where does he go? Where's the great Portuguese lineup? It's not happening in CSGO, boys. So I don't know where Fox would go. So obviously that was a weight on his mind. Now that it's been stated publicly multiple times, we're not kicking Fox. Fox is amazing. Fox drops Glocks, whatever Dr. Zeus type rhymes we need to do to justify being in the team. They were all put out there, and they were all put out there publicly. Obviously, Fox now super relaxed, goes into that major, proves that he's still a very, very good player indeed, and was instrumental in the run they had in the tournament, where let's not forget they were like 3 match points up against Envious, and conspired to lose the series. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. But what's interesting is, and this touches on what we talked about in the last show, where we had Makalela's, I guess now ex-girlfriend, going absolutely mad on Twitter and was just having that ridiculous Twitter rampage. And she even brought it up again, saying, guess which Portuguese guy is going to get kicked from G2 Esports? Like, smiley face. Like, obviously, taking a leaf
the
out.
covert chip, Rich.
Yeah, I was going to say,
like,
I think you should definitely give her a call, brother, because I think you've met your match there. And you've always said how much you love Russian women when we've been talking privately. So, but anyway, she brought it all up again, saying, hey, the players were talking about this recently. Makalela had to go on Twitter and deny it. So, I mean, do you think, surely not, like this team right now for me is one of the most exciting teams in Counterstrike, and you need a fucking player like Fox in there.
I mean, I certainly don't think they'll change now, because it's like, put it this way, just making it so far the major probably bought Fox a few months no matter what happens. So I imagine he'll at least get a fair go of it beyond this, just to see how things go. It's also quite a while until the next major. I mean, we don't know when it'll be, but it's got to be at least a few months. So there's not tons of tournaments, but there's a few they can play. Obviously, they're going to play IEM San Jose. And then the fact that you're bringing a new player alone means even if they did badly there, it would mainly be blamed on like integrating the new player. You wouldn't think it was because of Fox or whatever. So I don't think it'll be soon. I'm just saying one day, I don't think Fox will be in this lineup anymore.
It might be a long time off. I guess we'll wait and see how they do at the next major, and I'm pretty confident they will get there. Like I say, I'm loving the look of this team right now. Super happy for aizy. I hope he made some sick Skrilla from the move, and I'm sure Team Dignitas did as well. Speaking of Team Dignitas, the other news was just when you thought things couldn't get worse for them after they lose their star player. Now, next in the pecking order is Pimp, in my opinion, and he has left Dignitas today as well. Interesting situation arose. Like, it looked like Pimp was going to go after the CEVO finals. Pimp seemed to, like, it was all being done with kind of dignity and class. Team Dignitas put out a statement saying, you know, Pimp has decided to stand down, and that was a decision that was taken as a team. And we look forward to seeing him in action again in the near future. It was all very, it was all very nice, very classy way. And Pimp's played with the core of these players for something like almost 18 months now, if we go all the way back to the Copenhagen Wolves lineup. So this is a guy who, you would have thought it would be an amicable separation. Then you go onto Facebook, and MSL, the in-game leader for Team Dignitas, and I know Mateus, think he's a good guy, but he says, like, aizy got bought by G2 and we chose to kick Pimp. That's not a very cool thing to do, bro. Like, that's what the fuck. Just let us have the delicious lie that, it wasn't working, and Pimp went. And then Pimp on Twitter basically just said, hey, I'm going to get into another team. I don't know where it's going to be. It's going to happen soon, and I'll be rifling as it should. And he said, as it always should have been. So we can infer from that he wasn't happy about having to pick up the AWP from within the team to pick up that role after they kicked Nico. So it actually looks like a very sour separation here. And I got to say, we'll get on to the Team Dignitas acquisitions now when they brought in Config and RUBINO. But losing Pimp, for me, major blow, especially on the same day you lose aizy.
Thing is, the way it was phrased in that thing cracked me the fuck up, because the actual words literally about Pimp said this, Rich. It said, Pimp will be stepping down from the lineup, which is the team's decision. Which is like, that's like if I'm going, let's say I have like 3 dates with some super hot bitch. Let's say some like insane Russian girl who's like super into CSGO and I'm trying to get in that shit. So I'm on this date with her, right? We're having nice suka bliats and all that shit. Having some whatever Russians eat. I don't know. Borscht or something. It's like a beetroot type of soup. There we go.
Yeah, it's very nice. Yeah.
I'm back on point, boys. Reference game on point. So we're eating some borscht, and I say, after the date, I go back to my boys, and they're like, "Oh, how are things going? Like 4th date coming up?" I'm like, "No, actually, I've decided to break up with her. It was pretty much a relationship decision." And then I'm just like. And they're like, are you all right? I mean, I thought you said you broke up. You broke up with her, right? You actually just decided I was like, yep. definitely want Suka. And it's like, you know, and then I just go off and I get a 1980s USSR hockey jersey and I just weep into it and then burn it in a like one of those open barrels that like bombs have where they make a fire. And I just look off into the distance, sort of like Luke when Vader was on that pyre at the end of Return of the Jedi, like, yeah, and that's, I mean, if that was to happen, I don't think you would believe that I'd actually just chosen to break up with her, would I, Rich?
But here's the thing. So what I will say is, though, it's always been a difficult marriage. You know, like the Danish scene is so fucking crazy. Like these players, they know each other. You know, like it's really weird. They know each other really, really well. But in terms of they never seem to know each other to a point where it's like they can avoid each other's triggers and stop winding each other up. And generally when the relationship ends, they also know how to push each other's buttons on the way out, right? Like
especially the Danish scene.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I've never seen a more backstabbing, snipey, nastier scene, actually, like when teams break apart. Like it's one of the reasons why they've got all this wonderful individual talent, but until TSM really didn't produce a great Danish team, you know, they've always been held back because of the interpersonal relationships of the players. So I'm inclined to believe that it's actually amicable in the sense that I think Pimp wanted out or wanted to change his role at the very least, and that clearly wasn't going to happen. And I think there was some friction there, and he wanted to, you know, look at some opportunities. And equally, I think they were like pissed off about maybe some of the discussions that happened, and they wanted to make it abundantly clear we kicked him. But the bottom line is, in all of this, like, Pimp's a fucking great player, especially when he's got a rifle in his hand. And I think they should have maybe been like, okay, aizy's out the door now. We could pick up a designated AWPer and keep you and work through that shit. But, you know, and why wouldn't you? But apparently something's gone on. So I think losing Pimp is a real loss.
No, especially because they're losing aizy. That's the thing. aizy's like the best player, but before that, it used to be aizy and Pimp who carried the team. When Nico was literally like just an empty chair, they were having to win games 4v5. They were winning them, and it was Pimp and aizy carrying. And also, like, I have to agree what you've said about like the wording as if he didn't want to be an AWPer anymore is really suspicious. Because actually, in a way, that's kind of, if that's true, obviously we can't know as from an outsider. That's dirty as fuck that Dignitas has done him like this thing. Because think about it, his market value is at rock bottom. If he'd have left in like, let's say August of this year, I mean, the guy was fucking balling at that point in time. He was doing really well. Like I remember that series where they almost beat Envious at Gfinity Summer Masters 1, where it was in the semi-finals and they were on overpass and they lost the game on the second map. He was like an unreal player at that tournament. He was having like 6 stats. And so if he'd have left it at that point in time, I mean, he wouldn't have gone to TSM just because there's politics there from the past, but he could have gone to like a really good team. Like he could have gone to a G2 type team. Whereas at the moment, I have to say, even though I am fairly sure at least that he could get back to that level if he goes back to rifling and he has the right team. Unfortunately, CS people have a short memory, you know. People think once you become bad, you're just bad forever. Like other teams, unfortunately, that is the way their egos work. So unless he wants to join some dog shit team like fucking SK Gaming or someone who I wouldn't recommend, he's going to have to go international, right? Because who the fuck else is there? And even then, I mean, it's going to be hard to get like a Cloud9 or someone to take a risk on you if you just had all these bad months where you're AWPing.
Yeah, but this is the point, isn't it? Like, I mean, he's actually tried to do something, I won't say altruistic, but, you know, he's been the guy who's took the hit for Nico going out the door, whether he's took that responsibility willingly or whether it's like one of those things that you've just drawn the short straw, one of those situations where you volunteer by everyone taking a step back rather than you taking a step forward. I think if that is the case, it really, really sucks because you're right. His market value isn't where it would have been 6 months ago. And that's not a true reflection of the player. I'm sure someone will pick him up. It's just he is going to have to go international now. Like, if he puts together a sort of a Danish team that's left out of the scraps of the Danish scene, that's going to suck. If he ends up joining like the sort of Scandic mix of what's left over at Copenhagen Wolves, that's going to suck. Like, he's a much better player than that. And then that opens the possibility to like a North American move where you're always going to have the question, can they compete internationally?
If any North American team is watching this show right now and we know you are, stay salty freak, that let's be real, I've watched your teams play LANs all fucking 2015 long. I've watched Nitro come over to Europe and take like about 11 LANs before he had a good map against the European team. I've watched fucking Shroud go right to the top at the ESL Pro League finals and then drop off to having 7 frags in a major game. I've seen how overrated the star players are in NA. Pimp has played more good maps against top European teams on LAN than any of these guys have for almost the whole year. It might not look like it because he didn't have wins. He didn't win big LANs, but he's been a really solid player whose consistency was very good and who really had like mastered his style of play when he was a pure rifler and he kind of, they just put him in good positions. So I think he has pretty decent English. He's a guy who's one of the more sociable guys out of the Danish scene. So I actually think a lot of the NA teams, if they were smart, could use a player like him. I realize now it sounds like a bad deal because you get him now. But if anything, you can buy him at rock bottom and then take a chance. Some of your teams are dog shit anyway. None of you make the fucking finals of like round of 8 of majors. You haven't made it in 4 majors. So what the fuck are you grandstanding about? So I think a player like this for certain teams wouldn't be a bad gamble.
Well, you know, I'd love to see him, you know, with all the problems Team Liquid have been having, and you know they've been pulling out of some leagues and stuff at the moment. Wouldn't that be a great move? Like what he would add, you know, Hiko and Pimp on the same team. That could actually be something in NA. So, but anyway, hopefully Pimp gets a job opportunity that's commensurate with his skills. For now, Team Dignitas bring in Config and RUBINO. So in answer to the AWPing problem, they bring in RUBINO. Just to be clear, RUBINO does speak Danish. He lives in Denmark, so that's not going to be a problem communications-wise. But we watched RUBINO when he picked up the AWP and was playing. And we weren't very impressed, were we? We thought he was like not really... You know, he was a much better passive AWPer than he was aggressive.
Yeah, the problem with RUBINO is like he's been decent. In fact, this is the issue. That Copenhagen Wolves team, and then some of them in the past, like RUBINO when they've been in LGB, a lot of them were like a bit overhyped, mainly due to online results, where online they'd always find matches where they'd upset teams or they'd compete very well. But a lot of them were billed as like for example, Jacob, like, oh, he'd be super duper good. Well, he only was when he got to a better team. And then it turns out at one big tournament so far, we still don't know how that will even out over the next 4 or 5 tournaments. Likewise, Rain was actually always pretty good, but obviously he's improved a lot since he got the King win opportunity and got into a better team, more opportunities. So yeah, it's true. Maybe RUBINO could turn up to be a bit better, but I doubt he's going to make a big leap up. Like I think I've seen enough of him to know he's probably going to be quite similar level to what he was before. Config, on the other hand, is maybe there's some potential there because he had looked good previously. And then there were also these weird rumors that maybe even someone like TSM was going to consider him as like either a sub or even outright as, to put pressure on members of the lineup, you know? So maybe there's something there because at least he's like fresh enough into his career that there is a lot of room for improvement potentially. But I have to say, I look at these moves and yeah, Pimp was playing badly recently with the AWP, but in totality, removing Pimp, removing aizy, adding these two, at the moment, I don't see it making Dignitas better right now. Like I think Dignitas will actually probably be a little bit worse.
I mean, I agree with you because what the problem you've got here is now we haven't solved the choking issues of Kiebi, who goes missing in these big games. We're basically saying, oh, this is because he's young, he's inexperienced. I feel like we've been saying that for a long, long time. And now you're bringing in somebody else who's young and inexperienced. And, you know, is Config going to be able to live up to that potential where maybe Kiebi hasn't? So that's your next problem. I mean, I thought Tensky might be the stand-in. He's done okay since he's joining. But now, I don't know. I look at this team and I do feel it's a massive downgrade. People are pointing out, I think they played today and they beat, people are saying they beat Virtus Pro 16-4 on cash. But I think that just underlines that Virtus Pro is still having issues on that map. Not necessarily that.
Like I just looked on HLTV.org now. At CEVO, there was a game against Virtus Pro in the winners final of the group where Kirby on Mirage, Dignitas only lost 11-16, but Kirby had 8 kills. So I mean, you can see he's clearly got his issues still. Like, and so
no, it's an ongoing problem. It's an ongoing problem. I mean, this is the thing as well. It happens in the big games. Like, he's capable of dropping bodies against lesser opposition, but it's the big games where Kirby tends to go missing. And that's when you need your talented players to step up. So, I think it's a big gamble bringing in some, an unproven player like Config when you lose 2 proven international stars. But obviously, this is the situation you're in right now. Team Dignitas probably has had to scramble, really, to get all this put together. Clearly, these moves were made, I would say, without Dignitas's input whatsoever. I don't think they knew this was coming. And it's been said that G2, for example, have been making overtures to other players. There was a lot of talk that they were still trying to get Nico from Mouse Sports before they started talking to aizy again.
The good Nico.
Yeah, the good Nico, not Nico with a C, Nico with a K. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how it works out. I'm not going to be seduced by any honeymoon period here and thinking that this is a good team. I think the best they could maybe hope for with that lineup is scraping into a top 10 world, but even that world ranking, but even that I think might be unlikely. So let's move on to the next piece of news today. Shall we do the MTG thing?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. Let's get into that then. So obviously, MTG, it's finally happened. The move that I've been reporting on for a long, long time, it has finally gone through. It was a 100% buyout of DreamHack by the Modern Times Group for $28 million. And I had reported previously that the reason that the deal had been stalled for as long as it had been was basically it was a matter of valuation. Given that they paid 78 million euros for a 74% stake in ESL, I'm sure there'll be people out there that will think that this valuation is lower than it should have been. But let's not forget, DreamHack were being rapidly painted into a corner. I also reported on this Grand Prix that's going to be starting next year, which is a consortium or an alliance or whatever you want to call it, of the Gfinities, the Facets, the MLGs, PLGs, people like this. Sorry, PGL, I should say. And they're all being, brought in. Meanwhile, DreamHack wasn't invited to that particular table because they felt the MTG buyout was definitely going to happen. So at that point, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. DreamHack with nowhere left to go, with a team owners association saying next year we're only going to attend events if the first prize is something like $100,000 or whatever it is. It's got to be worth our while to attend. Meanwhile, on the DreamHack tour, most of the first prizes don't have that. They obviously needed to get bought by somebody. They needed to forge their own alliance and act within the interests of the company. The problem is now we have ESL, ESEA, and DreamHack on one side, owned by one parent company. And I thought always one of the coolest things in esports was watching how ESL and DreamHack would spur each other on as competitors. ESL would do something, DreamHack would put their own spin on it. DreamHack would take a risk, maybe with a talent hire or a choice of country or picking up a game or doing something a bit wild.
I mean, to be fair, Rich, ESL have taken their own risks with choices of country, but and talent indeed as well. So keep going.
Yeah. And then feed back into ESL coming back and trying to one-up DreamHack, and that competition became good because good things came out of it. Everybody was forced to improve. I don't think there's the same impetus there now that they're owned by the same parent company.
I'd never thought of it that way, Richard. Maybe that is what was happening. What was happening was in 2012, DreamHack had a tournament in Bucharest in Romania, and then ESL heard, "Oh, you're going to go to Eastern European countries that aren't really the same as first world Western nations. We're going to Poland."
Maybe that's
up in the stakes. Then DreamHack went to Moscow, and then ESL said, "Well, let's not be silly. I mean, where we're going to go from here."
So look, let's get into this. I mean, obviously, I know here's the worry, right? Like, so the ESL side of the MTG business. Look, I'm sure MTG are going to come out and say we want each of the companies we've acquired to have a very distinct identity. But ultimately, what's going to happen at some point is somebody within the MTG corporation is going to say, hey, ESL do this one thing really, really well. Let's take the guy who's the expert in that and bring him over to DreamHack.
What would that be?
You can
what do you think that would be? Maybe making rankings or something?
It could be that. Snarky tweets about dogs might be their field of expertise.
They had an industry leader in that, Rich.
Drugs testing. Yeah, so whatever it might be, they take that expert over to DreamHack, and then conversely, DreamHack will say, "Hey, well, you know, we do this thing really well, you know, pyrotechnics or whatever it is, and you can have the guy who does that, and he can come over and work on you with your stage shows." Now, ultimately, that sounds great because then you think, well, they're going to gain the expertise in all the areas they're weak, but the problem you've got there is one of cultural assimilation, and ESL has way more employees than DreamHack. So eventually, if the lines begin to blur, we're going to end up with two ASLs rather than two DreamHacks. I think that's what everyone's really worried about. And indeed, if I was somebody who was massively critical of ESL and massively critical of MTG and had been enjoying a run of undisputed employment by DreamHack, I might be a little bit worried as well, Duncan.
Aren't you someone like that?
I don't think so. I like to think of myself as pragmatic. I like to think of myself as pragmatic, and willing to work through everybody's different.
I like to be. I think I'm an optimistic person, Rich. So I'm imagining it could work out. Like as you're saying, ESL head office thinks, right, you know what we'll do? DreamHack has their own sort of flavor, but we'll send over the people who, you know, like Richard was saying on that show, we're going to send over the people that do what we do best at ESL. So they send over a guy, and he arrives at DreamHack, and then he starts talking to DreamHack. He says, right, I'm from the marketing department. Right, first thing we need to do is kind of like shake the image up a little bit. Like basically what we're going to do is we're going to build DreamHack as like the industry leader. And then Greg Khan and those guys will go like, well, I mean, wouldn't that be like a bit unethical? I mean, are we actually the industry leader? How would anyone even determine such a thing? Because no, you don't understand. You just say you're the industry leader. Like what you do, see, get the pen, write it down. We are the industry leaders. And then, you know, make like some numbers up there. Just say that your events are magical. You try to use adjectives that can never really be pinned down, so that your events are magical, that you maintain a certain spirit, and that you lead the industry with certain values. Values is a great term, doesn't mean anything. You say you've got certain qualities that you're trying to develop in esports as a greater whole. You know, a lot of vagaries, you know, maybe you look at some old Clinton and Gorb speeches, you know. So you say all this stuff, and then they're like, oh, okay, yeah, very interesting. And then they go, but now can you take back this guy over with you? He's going to come from DreamHack and teach ESL some of our ways. So then the guy gets there to the ESL office, and then they say, okay, so what have you possibly come to teach us? Because I mean, we're the industry leaders. They look over at that guy that they sent over, like, yep, can confirm that's true. And then they say, so what are you possibly going to teach us? And then they say, well, you know, when you make talent hires, and like, yeah. I mean, with obviously leading the industry, that you know, you can just like hire all the best people, right? And they go, well, what do you mean though? Like, how can we? Like, the best people in esports don't do Battlefield or Call of Duty. And you go, no. Oh, I see what the problem is. I understand now. You can actually just hire people who are the best at the game you want to hire them at, and then they'll even work like yeah, but we haven't got space in our company for them. Don't you understand, sir? And he goes, no, you're not understanding. They work on a freelance basis, and you can hire them just for that one event. You don't even have to pay them a full-time salary. Don't have to pay them a full-time salary. What is this? But they won't be doing your Battlefield tournaments. But if only we had someone who could do the Battlefield and the Call of Duty tournaments. No, you do. You've already got them employed. Oh my God, this changes everything. And suddenly I imagine a utopia rains down on both companies, Rich. And it's totally not like Empire Strikes Back, the ending of that movie, which is where we are right now. And you've just had your hand cut off, and I've been put into carbonite and sent off to, I don't even know, Carmack's fucking layer or some shit. I don't even know where that one's going.
But no, here's the thing, though, dude. Like, look, on a serious note, you know, ESL. One of the reasons why they have these issues is they would rather have the talent in house, right? They would rather have the talent in house and under ESL's kind of control full time. I agree with you. I don't think it's a model that's particularly effective. I don't think it necessarily works. I think, you know, you should.
I mean, if it works, think about this: the best caster they have in house is D-Man. He is by far the best in bearing in mind Joe Miller doesn't do like full-time casting at the moment, it seems. So the best they have is D-Man. And he obviously was one of the biggest names in League of Legends. So if the model works, how have they not been able to sell D-Man to the community? I made a video today about it, kind of addressing some of the nuances of it. It obviously hasn't really worked. And if he's the best case scenario, it's going to be hard to do with the newer guys to get in, you know. So, I mean, listen, it's their life. They can do what they want in that sense. But I still think that will always be something that will plague them, unfortunately.
But look, on a serious note, like we know now, right? And you know, try and keep the Star Wars references just to a minimum if you can. We know from having talked privately and of course on this show that the bridge between you and ESL, it's an irreparable pile of ashes with a few bodies in it and perhaps even a few dead dogs. I don't even know anymore. But the problem we've got there is you'll never do an ESL event. As long as you're not doing an ESL event, I'm not doing an ESL event. So then we get into this situation where what if that culture just start to trickle down to DreamHack? Are we not doing DreamHack events? Aren't you worried about that? Because remember, you've been on this show and you were like, I'm banging this fit Swedish blonde bird while ESL's over there talking about what a terrible man. I don't give a fuck, right? But then if they take DreamHack away, you know, is it going to be enough if we're doing the MLGs, the Facets, you know, anyone else who might want to hire us out there, the Gfinities? Is that going to be enough for you? Because that might mean we don't get majors. It's
like I came back to Sweden and that really fit Swedish blonde girl, I would think she's come back. Her hair's all shaved down. She's a radical third wave feminist. She's explaining to me that even by talking to her now, I'm actually violating laws of consent and possibly raping her mind by allowing my thoughts to enter it without her consent. And so then I'm just like, oh, this has just ruined everything, love. Like, we had a great thing going for you now. It's okay, though. I've got that Russian bird. So, I mean, I'll still figure things out. Maybe Star Ladder for me next, Rich, to follow the analogy.
Yeah, well, you know, maybe, right? But, you know, eventually, I think the way esports is going, I said this multiple times. I think edgy people, for want of a better phrase, right? Like, and that's not a term I'd use to describe you or me. But it's what people say about us on Reddit and stuff. You know, like on a long enough time scale, I think we're out of esports anyway, right? Like, I mean, you know, we can't be the face or the voice, you know. They want it sanitized and cleaned up and presentable for mass market, which means, you know, all ages, PG-13, family.
I understand now, Richard. You mean because of the tone? I thought you were going to get in a dangerous area there inadvertently, Rich, because I thought you were about to say because we're getting too old. And I'll just remind you, D-Man was born in 1977. By the way, the release year of Star Wars: A New Hope. Maybe he can be a new hope for CSGO.
Right. Well, look, man, let's do it then. Brilliant. Yeah, excellent stuff, mate. It's all gone full circle. Let's talk about D-Man some, right? Since as you brought him up, you know.
Did you just say D-Man San? He's not Japanese.
No, let's talk about D-Man Sum, not Dim Sum. D-Man Sum, and not. Okay. There's no. Look, I'm not a weeaboo. Like, you fucking just stop trying to make me out to be one. So they there was a obviously a thread that came up where he, in an ESL interview, D-Man had said, hang on, I've got the exact wording here. So the question in the ESL interview was, you were, and to many still are, one of the faces of professional League of Legends casting. Was it difficult to end the Riot chapter in your life and begin a new one focused on CSGO? And he said, yes, it was very difficult and honestly something I regret doing. I made choices based off my personal life at the time, and it turned out to be the wrong decision. That was the answer. Okay. Now that led to a Reddit thread, basically saying, "Why do we let this guy cast a major if he says he regrets making the move over to CS:GO?" Which D-Man, obviously being somebody who always gets upset whenever there's Reddit threads about him that obviously don't fillet him or you know, fucking placate his huge ego. He says, I say I regret leaving LCS. CS Reddit twists it to say I regret doing CS. You could be politicians the way you twist words. Well, actually, my response to that tweet would be, that's actually a very politician type of answer, because you can't have one without the other. It's like saying, you know, I didn't kill Thorin, but I just locked him in a room where there happened to be no oxygen. You could be politicians the way you're trying to pin this murder on me. You know what I mean?
See, that actually seems like that might be a case, an argument that ESL one day attempts to use, Richard, that they didn't actually kill Thorin. You know.
Yeah. But I mean, so I found that very odd. Like, he must know that interview is going to find its way into social media. He has enough knowledge now of how esports works. He's been in it a long enough time. Okay. So if you're going to say, I regret leaving the League of Legends casting, and keep in mind the question was it difficult to end the Riot chapter in your life and begin a new one focused on CSGO? And you say it's something I honestly regret doing. It turned out to be the wrong decision. The implication is that choosing to focus on CSGO is something you regret and is the wrong decision. You don't just get to spin it around. Now, here's the thing. I don't even disagree with him. It was the wrong decision. Massively the wrong decision. But it was a decision that was predicated on the belief that he could come into CSGO, do an incredible job, and everybody would be super welcoming and patient. Sorry, we've got an abundance of really good commentators in Counterstrike right now. You have to be something pretty special to get noticed at all and to get opportunities. You know, if you think about it, we've got, you know, Anders and Semler, James Bardolph and DDK, Henry G and Sadikist. That's before we even start adding people like Moses and Fiflaren as color casters into the mix and everything else, right? Like Natu's doing color. We've already got like a really solid talent pool. The only reason that the talent pool of that nature doesn't get hired for ESL events is that they're trying to shoehorn the people they've spent massive amounts of money to hire into CSGO events. And that's the only reason. So if Leigh thought that he was going to be able to just come in and just have it all laid out for him, hugely naive and actually very disrespectful of the talent that had already worked incredibly hard within the Counter-Strike scene in his absence. Then on top of that, you've got ESL trying to almost artificially make the community more welcoming of D-Man by putting him in finals and breaking up beloved pairings to do so. And it's similar that has suffered greatly at the hands of this fantasy that ESL had, that if we just put D-Man in enough finals, the community will start loving him. Now, the reality
and you'll
there
notice,
is,
by the way, Richard,
yeah.
Semler has never publicly said anything about that. He's never ever made a tweet like, oh, I'm disappointed not to do this final. Or so. He's never ever publicly said anything. Just thought I'd put that out there.
Yeah. And by contrast, every time Reddit seems to get a little bit upset that D-Man's been shoehorned into a final, breaking up the duo that people want to have in the final, obviously he seems almost aghast and horrified that it's happening. This is the business. I will tell you this. Nobody would have had a problem with D-Man's ascent to the top if they felt he had earned it. Nobody. All right? But in CSGO, whether it was his decision to put himself in the finals, ESL's decision to put him in the finals, a combination of the two, you cannot bullshit this community. You cannot lie to this community. You know, they're going to see through it. It's just that simple. So I am incredibly perplexed now that he thinks saying something like, yeah, totally regret leaving LCS. Why did he not think that would get fucking, picked up and be plastered all over social media? Of course it is. You've done finals of events that talent out there have strived and worked for years while you were doing League of Legends and getting, fucking blown backstage by groupies and doing coke or whatever rock and roll lifestyle Riot was affording you at that particular time. You've already led a fucking life in one game that people would have killed for in any other game beyond even the StarCraft era of excess. And then when you come into another game, you deprive opportunities from other people. And then you say, yeah, I totally regret it because it didn't fucking work out. Holy shit. You may as well have just took your fucking dick out and fucking pissed in like the face of all of these like secondary tier casters who would have killed to do the final of a major. Your DDKs, your Bardolphs. You may as well have literally just in their fucking face.
The thing is, there's a great quote, Richard, from the movie Sin City. It's actually from the comic as well, where when the Hartigan character, when he's dying at the end of the movie, it's not even a spoiler. It's like that's part of the story. But he saved the young girl, Nancy, who was like the girl who'd been orphaned or whatever. He says some epic line that's like, "An old man dies, a young woman lives. A fair trade." Like basically, if you're an old fuck like that and you haven't earned your way through, you are kind of denying like the young guys who are coming up. I mean, the people with all the names you're listing there aren't people who are inserted into a final. They've all literally built their way up and been vetted by the community. Like no one's getting Salikist and forcing him into some event, and then everyone in the community being like, "What the fuck? Why is that guy there?" Everyone wants him on these events, so those guys have paid their dues. The problem here, I mean, I addressed a lot of this in my video. You've covered a lot of it, so I won't go over it again. But one of the biggest issues
I didn't have time to watch it. I didn't even know it was out.
I mean, I only just released it before this show, so don't worry about that. But one of the main points that I had to make was essentially this idea that people don't know this backstory, but just at the end of his time in League of Legends, he made a lot of comments that were along the lines. Because in League of Legends, he was at the top. He'd reached the top of the mountain. He'd done everything. He made a lot of comments that implied stuff like that casting's a sort of meritocracy. Like he literally told a woman caster, who's a very good caster, like, you know, forget like your gender, just be better than the other casters. Simple. Or, you know, like you earn your way there rather than just being given your spot. And then obviously months later, he had literally all those things, like almost the antithesis of his philosophy there, applied to his career. So unfortunately, I mean, that's not why people in CSGO dislike him, but that is like a little bit distasteful if you're then going to complain after the fact, you know, like it's got to be one way or the other. And I came to this conclusion in my video, actually. I think people haven't probably thought of it, but in a weird way, I think D-Man's in this crazy catch-22 scenario where the only reason he's really relevant in CSGO is because he works for ESL. So ESL's putting him in the biggest events. Here's the problem. The way he could get to the big events naturally would have to be not to work for ESL. Because if he was just another caster who was a freelance, for sure he would get hired by like StarLadder or a PGL. Or he'd get hired by the smaller guys. He'd work his way up. And if people liked him, he would then naturally get to become a tier 1 caster. It would happen eventually for him. So in a weird way, the position he's in has sort of fucked him over a little bit as well.
Yeah, but I agree with that, right? So I think, you know, if it was ESL's decision, shoehorn him in, and you know, that needs to be clarified when Leigh invariably goes back to Riot or whatever the fuck's going to happen right now. Because, you know, it's not fair he carries the can for that creative decision, but just based on his reaction when there was community backlash, you know, I get the impression that this was, you know, fucking his decision, because he was coming out on Reddit and going, "Oh, I've not done the final, you know, I blah blah blah." So I'm being told that we need to take a break here, fix the technical issue.
Okay.
All right. So, but anyway, what we'll do is we'll wrap up the D-Man point.
Okay.
For the benefit of the VOD.
So let's wrap it up then. Really good League of Legends caster comes in as CSGO, gets shoved in everyone's face. People say, not quite now, please. I'd like some more Semler. And then he just gets a bit upset by that. One tier for Counterstrike, and then maybe back off to League of Legends.
Yeah. I mean, so there we go. Fair summary. Anyway, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break while we fix this technical problem, and then we'll be back to talk about all the other happenings today in CSGO. See you in a moment. Right, we're back. Sorry about that. Apparently, the software we're using doubled up, so you were getting me in Space Ghost Echo style. So we apologize. But anyway, I think we've summarized the D-Man situation there. You know, I've seen a lot of people kind of be sympathetic for some reason, like saying, oh, you know, our community's so bad. No, actually, at this stage, I would say it's a valid criticism. This has been behavior that's really almost diva-ish. It's disrespectful to the other talent in the scene. Who've earned their spots at finals and had them took away by somebody who's getting there artificially. So no, I'm not inclined to be sympathetic at this point. I've always strayed away from talking about it, frankly and candidly, because obviously we've had our own checkered history down the years, and there's some spillover from League of Legends where we both did things to each other that we would probably regret. But this isn't linked to any of that. This is just the facts as they're laid out. So.
Can I ask you a question about that, actually? I've got one last thing to ask. Yeah, so when I was looking to do my video, I actually looked up the exact quotes of the stuff D-Man said in like his AMA and on Twitter, you know, to find that information out. And when I was doing so, I actually found an answer in his AMA from like 10 months ago. So it must have been like just when he'd started doing CSGO shit, where someone asked him on the League of Legends subreddit what his relationship with you was like, obviously referencing the thing where like that email got leaked over the IEM. I think it was the last San Jose, I think, right? Wasn't it? Wasn't it that one? So I think it was around that time. So
yeah, it was just before I was meant to do IEM San Jose.
So it was over that. That's what the person was obviously implying, like that there'd been a blow up over that. And they said something to him along the lines of like, "What is your relationship?" And he said something like he didn't talk to you, but if he had to work with you professionally, he would. Now, as far as I remember, you implied that he was actually directly to do with you getting blocked working at that event. And since then, as you've kind of referenced, you've been offered ESL jobs, and he's obviously on CSGO now. But so you were joking before, like you're not in any way in contention with ESL. What is that not an issue for you anymore? Is that all squashed or something?
No, I mean, look,
could you work with him?
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. My issue with Leigh is the issue I would have with anybody in this position, and that is that it takes a colossal amount of ego, which we obviously all have in our own way, to basically say, I deserve to be in a final over like an Anders or a Semler, who are the de facto casting group. But it takes an even bigger ego to look at people who are on that, like I say, that secondary tier, people who are capable of doing big finals of big events and entertaining a crowd and delivering the narrative. Like I say, you know, I'm talking about your DDK and James Bardolphs. I'm talking about, you know, your even your Henry G and Sadikist, I believe, right now, who make an excellent pairing. There are people out there, right, that could do this and do it better than you. So it takes a colossal amount of ego, I think, to say those people don't deserve it and I do. And he said that numerous times. Now let's think in a backhanded way, of course, never directly, because if there's one thing that all of these types of people from League of Legends understand, and indeed ESL people understand, it's how to try and put a spin on things so the community think, oh, they're kind of the victims and all of this. So actually that makes sense when it's worded that way, when in actual fact what you need to be looking at is the sentiment behind what they're saying, not the words themselves. Now,
no, I agree. In many ways, people who are from League of Legends tend to be bitch made from the jump. That's how actually we say it in the vernacular of where I'm from, Richard.
Right.
The hood.
See that. The hood, right? Of course, the streets where you're from. So anyway,
Mob Deep said in the song "Shook Ones Part 2," cowards like them just get their whole bodies laced up.
Yeah, it's true, mate. It's true. A great album, by the way. One of the great albums in hip hop history. But so the point that I'm making here is, think about the event we've just done. We've just done a major for DreamHack, where DreamHack assembled what is probably the greatest roster of talent, just in terms of literally ability and standing. Okay. That arguably has ever been assembled outside of maybe something like a BlizzCon, but maybe ever. That's how off the deep end they went to get everybody in there. Now, and yet, despite all of those collective egos in one room at one event, there was no problems. There was no ongoing issues. Everybody understood everybody's role. We had fun with each other. We made fun of each other on stream. We hung out with each other off stream. We everything was fine. We all came out at the end on stage, and that's like a great moment. Like, I'm super happy I got to work that event. I feel honored.
That was a great photo, right? That was an awesome moment.
Yeah, like humble.
You realize that one day we will literally, as old men, get that photo and just be like, and there's young Henry G. I remember he died in a horrific car crash 2 years later, driven by a Lithuanian man who seemed to have some sort of grudge about losing skins or something, you know, like dead now, of course.
Dead now, of course. Yeah, and you know, like we fucking had like just this amazing time. It's an amazing moment. If it never happens again, that for me will probably be like the high watermark of my CSGO career. And I say that completely unabashedly. Now, think about the ESL events, right? And think about all the petty drama and squabbling and bullshit that goes on, and the hurt feelings and the resentment that bubbles underneath the surface when someone just comes in. I'll be doing the final then, yes, Emlet. Good lad, stick kettle on. Get me a cup of coffee. Like, you know what I mean? Is this fucking real? This should never be happening. That should never be happening. But it happens at those events all the time. And it's even got to a point where, you know, people like fucking Valve are like, you know, we just want the best talent. We just want the best show at a major. We don't want any of the politics. So it tells you everything about people's individual egos and who cares about the scene and the development of the scene. That when we did that fucking event in DreamHack, there wasn't a single problem outside of, you know, perhaps a few discussions about, you know, oh, can we get this? Can we get that? Things the talent need to be at optimal level of performance. There was no issues in terms of inter-talent friction. Yet when you go to those events, there always is. That's all you need to know. So look, I know ESL would hire me. They've offered, but I got to be honest. I'm obviously begrudging because of their stance on you. I'm begrudging because I know in the past they fucked me out of events where they've said, you definitely work in this event, and gone, nah, you definitely not. I mean, they paid me for that San Jose event. I didn't get to work because it was so last minute and all the shit that went off between me and D-Man. But one thing I will say is to sort of end the segment. Obviously, D-Man's not pulling those strings because they came to me and said, do you want to host this event? And I turned them down. So for the previous major that they did in Cologne. So obviously D-Man isn't being diva-ish or prima donna-ish in that regard. That's what I will say. So anyway, let's move on. What do we want to do next?
I had a topic that reminds me of, since we're talking about D-Man.
Yeah, because we're talking about talent, actually. Yeah, your topic was good. Let's get that to the table.
People can obviously see him casting at the next ESL event, which is IEM San Jose, I believe. Isn't he doing that one?
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
he's doing League. Actually, I think I've got it wrong. He's doing League of Legends for that one. But on the CSGO side, not only is Joe Miller coming back, so he's doing that event. But interestingly, the one thing I noticed no one saw, because we actually talked about this, I think, last week. Okay, so we saw the whole casting lineup. They have Moses. They have all these really good people. But interestingly, for the host, they have that woman who I forget her name. It's like Christine Leigh or something. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Who is the girl from the Colin Cowherd show where they talked about esports a couple of times. It's getting a bit boring now because they keep doing it. It's essentially the same shit every time. He makes some mildly provocative statement, just some moron people online like esports are watching in outrage, and then she just defends gamers and says, no, they're not like that at all. Now, first of all, as a total aside, I actually have an issue with the way that she defends gamers on there, because she just goes too far the other way. Like, yeah, he makes it out as though they're all nerds who live in their basement and have never touched a woman. Okay, true. That's ridiculous. I mean, let's be real. There's a decent percentage are that, but obviously not all of them. That is ridiculous because it's grown as a lifestyle choice. But she goes too far the other way. I mean, on the last segment I saw, he was saying that they're the sort of people who just eat like Cheez-Its and, you know, drink Mountain Dew. And she was saying like, no, because I think of nerds as being very smart. So I'm sure they would make smart diet decisions. Like, really, love? And I don't think so somehow. Like, I think there's one thing we cannot say. It's that gamers have like good diets based on how smart they are in choosing games. I mean, that's a bit ridiculous. But anyway, that's a side issue. So the interesting thing is she's been hired now as the host / interviewer, I think. Maybe like whatever you call that title now. I'm not sure, stage host. Now, within her role, here's the thing. On the real, I'm actually fairly sure she'll probably do a good job. If she has experience on camera, she's done some sort of sports work, I'm sure she has all the technical skills to do a good job. Won't know much about the game, but in general, those sorts of interviews from history tells us they're not going to be super in-depth anyway. But with that said, I notice that people who are big feminist advocates within esports weren't up in arms about this, Rich, even though what's happened is a woman has been hired who has no background in esports, who just defended esports and said she thinks it's good, but has a totally different background for a totally different game. Now, think in theory, don't we have quite a lot of women for real who are actually women who are involved in esports, who've done hosting, and it could be hired for a job like this? Surely feminists should be arguing against the meritocracy of this, Seems like hypocrisy, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I've said actually quite consistently, we've already got somebody that would make for a great interviewer and a stage presence in CSGO, somebody who's definitely paid their dues in esports, and somebody that's actually going to great lengths right now to learn about the game. And that is
Makaleli's girlfriend.
Yeah, that's her too, definitely. But Smix, right? Like she's a class act. Like I've worked with her at numerous events, including DreamHack. Obviously, she's a Twitch partnership manager, like every other motherfucker out there these days, right? So yeah, I mean, why not her, right? She's more than capable of doing that job, in my opinion.
Certainly, and she's played CS:GO as far as I know.
Yeah. And we've got
in the 2 pugs that she played with Huck, where his entire knowledge of CS:GO came from. Wrecked, get up my face. That'll be the end of the Huck segment of this show.
And I know, like, obviously, like there's still obviously Rachel Quirico out there who she did some stage hosting at the PGL event we did, the kickoff season for PGL that we did.
Richard, she's been in esports a long time, so I'd be over the moon if she was hired.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
In joke, just keep going, guys.
Yeah, no, I know, dude. I get it. I hate it when you do that to me, though. Like, I'm trying to make these good points, and you're just like firing all these little in jokes to throw me off my game, dude. This isn't like when we're doing a show, and like 1 second before live, you go, "Die, you fucking dickhead," or whatever. Like just in the mic, like, you know what I mean? This is suck a dick. Like, it's not like that. This is I've got to pontificate and articulate my thoughts well here. So anyway, she would be another good choice. But I'm feeling like Smix is actively doing the work to get into CS right now. I think she'd be a wonderful addition. And again, this is a worrying trend. It's actually, I'm going to move away from the feminist side of the argument because that's always dangerous. It always tends to obfuscate the real issue. While people become more and more extremely focused on this. But the reality is ESL have brought in now a couple of people from, and they're not the first to do it by any means, but a couple of people from TV with esports experience.
There was that the Sunny D kid, OJ Berg.
Yeah.
I have all the best nicknames, Rich. I can make them up for him. There you go, the Sunny D kid. That's a pretty wicked nickname.
Right. So they're bringing them in now, and where is this idea of if ESL? I can't even remember. Did they have the slogan "for gamers by gamers" at one point, or is that someone else? I don't even know. But the point is, again, if you're the industry leader, don't lose all of that experience. Don't bring outsiders in when we've got perfectly good people here. No disrespect to OJ Borg. I don't see him doing anything as a stage host. I haven't seen esports specific stage hosts do.
Yeah, here's the thing, Richard. I'll actually use an example from Dota 2 because the best original example of this was this Casey woman who's a local newscaster or something in, I think, Seattle, who was hired to do the international 2 years ago. Yeah. Here's the thing. The first job she did within the context of never having done Dota was great. She showed her technical skills. She was very amiable. She did a good job interviewing the players. The problem was, I remember the next year when I watched an interview in terms of what had she done in the year between. She had never even played Dota 2 in the year between. She was just about to play her first game, something like a month before. Now, I'm not asking her to become a gamer, but listen, bearing in mind you're probably going to do the job again, watch a little bit, read a little bit, maybe just play like 20 games or something on the easiest skill servers or whatever with a friend who just tells you the basics. Again, the whole point is here, there's not really you can't go one or the other. We're not asking them to become totally massive gamers, but give a bit of compromise. So my problem here is kind of like to reference what you were saying. If IEM is world's best gamers, well, it's world's best gamers, except for production staff and people like that. Like, no, it's supposed to be a gaming thing where at least you should know some of the basics. So I would hope in the future, either we can develop our own talent or the people who come in at least put in their yards and don't do a D-man. Don't do a D-man, guys.
Well, no, but here's the thing, right? We had something like this in League of Legends. You remember that Harold Goldberg guy?
Good guy.
He wrote that. Yeah, brilliant. He wrote that. He wrote that article for it was Playboy, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, Playboy. That's right.
And everybody fawned over it and said it was the best piece of journalism ever done in esports. I mean, it was a passable article, maybe above the level of some of the writers, but certainly not all of them by any stretch of the imagination. And it went out there, and then all of a sudden he was like, he got such a big pop on the League of Legends subreddit, which we all know is huge internet traffic. So all of a sudden it was like, hey, I'm going to make the League of Legends experience book. Sets up a fucking Kickstarter for it, right? Like, can we make this happen? Starts promising all these like fairly outrageous stretch goals, where if he makes like X amount of money, he was like saying, I'll release interviews I've already done. Brilliant. You're not just using this for a fucking cash grab, are you? Like, at all. Anyway, everybody fawned over it. Thankfully, that Kickstarter didn't make as much money as he was proposing, where it was like, I don't know, fucking ridiculous, insane amounts of money. I don't even think it cleared 10,000 to do it. He's done it. It's out. He's hawking it right now on Twitter. But, like, if you look at this guy's Twitter feed right now, like, okay, well, you know, it's like the occasional, like, heh, you know, like I did this, and look, here's a League of Legends thing that I'm retweeting, and no. What's this guy actually doing? Like, this guy trying to sell himself as like some sort of esports aficionado? I'm not buying it. Like, he just said, right, look at this tweet for like something unbelievably mundane. Double Lift joining TSM has got to make it even more of a team of League of Legends superstars. Brilliant. Like, your finger on the pulse, yeah. Like, there's so many other like storylines and shit that come out of that move, and that's what you've come up with. You obviously love this fucking game. And interestingly enough, like when I criticized him for doing a cash grab, he basically had nowhere to run at the time, and then he fucking I got a job at the New York Times, and then retroactively wrote to my editor after I'd left the Daily Dot asking that I correct an article for something that was factually accurate. He wrote this book called All Your Base Belong to Us. Again, okay. not great shakes. It currently sits at 2 stars on Amazon UK, and sure, that's from like 4 reviews or something. And I made a point of that in the article, saying it sits at 2 stars. It's hardly going to set the world on fire. He was like, that is not true. That is never true. I tweeted a link at him. Blocked, of course. So this guy, like, you know, the idea that he genuinely cares about fucking esports is ridiculous. And I don't want more and more people like this being brought in, where they can see a good thing, exploit people's goodwill, get all this presence and status, and make money out of it. And in actual fact, we've got people just as capable, if not more so, because of the wealth of knowledge that they have about this industry, like, in place to do these jobs. We've got great journalists. Go fund them. Right? We've got fucking, you know, don't make them write for some little fucking website that's too scared to rock the boat, or even a big website that's too scared to rock the boat. Don't come down on them every time they publish a piece of news that hasn't been broken by their organization yet. Go and support these people. Don't support fucking assholes that are using you like fucking numbers. They just see dollar signs for everyone. They don't give a fuck. Where's their pedigree and prestige? How much blood, sweat, and tears have they put into the industry? And what, now that it's shit and gold bricks, they want to come along and get a sack full and fuck off again? Anyone who supports that culture is actually harming and being detrimental to esports, not the other way around. So when I see people like this being brought in, they better fucking stick around and pay their dues. Because if they turn up annually for one fucking paycheck and don't do anything in between, get the fuck out my industry, as Sir Scoots might say. There you go. I mean, that's me.
With that said, just to bring the rant back, we're not literally saying that the Christine woman is like trying to do it for Dota. It's just her first event. I'm just saying, I hope it goes differently than the trend I've seen with that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Where they
that's what I'm saying. It's got to
say they love gaming, but they don't do shit beyond that. Like, again, if they want to have a career, they can have a career, but you have to work hard like everyone else.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. I've got no problem with new people coming in outside. I've got no problem with people falling in love with esports. I totally get that. It can be seductive. It can be amazing. You go to your first event, and these days events are huge, and it can totally blow you away and make you a fan for life. That's fucking great. There's no criticism of being inexperienced and coming in and finding. But if you come in, you take a paycheck, and it's all about just getting you out there to a new sexy demographic of fucking, you know, middle class, 18 to fucking 26-year-old white guys with money to burn. If it's about that, if it's about expanding your profile to that demographic and nothing else, I don't fucking want you here, and nobody should want you here. We got plenty of people who were due a fucking payday that have broke their back to get it to this stage. You've got no business coming in. None at all. That's my opinion on it. It might sound elitist. I don't give a fuck. There's fans in this business that have more fucking right to an opportunity than some fucking media trained outsider who's just using it as a fucking way of getting more business down the road. So hopefully she stays in, develops a taste for it. We see her at more events. If she's good, I'll be loving that. I'll fully support that. And it would once and for all end the stupid debate about whether there's like a skill ceiling or a barrier to women coming into esports. If you're good enough, you'll get the gig. I do believe that. I do believe that there is a meritocracy in place. But equally, I would much rather see Smix or someone like that in that role. That's just my personal opinion. So
sure, I agree.
There we go. Right, let me see. I'm trying to think. Holy shit, how could I forget this? How could I forget this? Obviously, Ding Dong, the witch is dead. Witch old witch, Per Lilliefelth. He's out of NIP because all of those things that I wrote were completely false. So I'm psyched about this. I see this as a big victory for the industry, even though I'm seeing a lot of rumors coming through that he's not out of esports. He might end up in another company. Someone even told me he might be going to MTG. If that's the fucking case, I think me and you need to just go into the garage and suck a fucking tailpipe. Like just go out together. Like, fuck it. But maybe not, right? Maybe not. Maybe that's all bullshit, right? But anyway, I'm just so fucking happy that we're taking steps forward now to get NIP back on track, that there's actually some culpability being copped to now by this organization that have fucked over those players down the years. So obviously, I've got plenty more to write about them and plenty more to write about him specifically. But I just wanted to get your opinions about this and what you think it might mean for NIP and CSGO in general, because we haven't talked about this.
So if he's left, who's actually taking over then?
Well, okay, so they brought in, it was Patrick Johnson, if I remember rightly. Yeah, Patrick Johnson has been named the interim CEO. And so he's going to be making the day-to-day decisions, apparently, until they appoint a full-time person. Now, obviously, Patrick Johnson comes over from the company Exertify, I think it is. And obviously, these are all closely linked, all of these companies and groups. It's a very incestuous scene. In the Swedish esports scene, but he's going to be the interim CEO, and Per's whereabouts aren't known. So yeah. Again, I mean, I feel this is almost like a bit of vindication for all the things that have been going on, and actually a step towards relieving some of the pressure that's being put on the players. Because I mean, like, I haven't written about it yet, but I mean, this guy, by all accounts, is a fucking tyrant, dude. Like, some of the demands he was putting on the players were unreasonable. This guy was completely unreachable. Whenever they wanted to come to a compromise, like, hey, where's the money? He would just be like, no, you need to concentrate on doing your job, right? And let me handle that. And it's like, yeah, but I'm owed money from like 7 months ago, and he's like, just concentrate on doing your job. It's really unprofessional of you to bother me in this way. Well, part of being able to concentrate on doing your job is getting fucking paid for doing your job. And in fact, when it comes to prize money, you have earned that money independently of any efforts of the organization. Yes, the organization might have sent you to the tournament. They might have got you a hotel. But when you're on stage playing that game, competing, that's your fucking money. I would love to see a system brought in, actually, where tournament organizers changed the fucking paradigm. They changed the power structure, and they pay the money out directly to the players, and the organization can chase them for their 20%. I'd like to see that.
Do you think that him leaving might now make it where NIP players will stay in NIP where otherwise they might have left?
No, of course not. Absolutely not. And there's a reason that they're dropping out of these fucking tournaments left, right, and center right now. Obviously, they've publicly stated, Get Right stated, that it's all to do with taking a break. You think about some of the grueling, and I mean unbelievably grueling, run of events that NIP have had in the past. Think about even at the height of all of the speculation where these players were going to end up and everything. They were going to event after event after event, and they were like the walking wounded. You know, they weren't even playing particularly well. Yet they still were doing it. Now, all of a sudden, they're deciding not to go to these events. These players are fucking done. They're done getting fucked. They're done. It's just that simple. They're all looking. I understand, and I'm sure I'll be corrected whether this is true or not. But I understand that actually, as of the end of October, the players in the team have a clause in their contract which allows them to listen to other offers from organizations and teams. So I'm pretty sure this is why they didn't want to rock the boat now. And in fact, this might have been one of the worst times to rock the boat from a player perspective, because they don't want any impediment to them getting a new opportunity. But make no mistake, that lineup will not exist come January. No doubt. It just cannot be that way. Why would they put themselves through that? Why would you re-sign with an organization that has treated you with such disdain? And let's be clear what NIP is. I know that there's so many NIP fans out there, but let's be clear what NIP is. That brand, okay, so to begin with, that brand is brought back from the dead. It is given value by Heaton and the original Counterstrike superstars, right? That's why that brand has any value whatsoever. So as soon as Heaton gets fucked out of it, and remember, he's not an owner anymore. He is basically just a cheerleader who is paid to go around and represent the brand like a brand ambassador. He owns nothing on paper anymore. Diglife waited until he was at the lowest ebb and was facing all of these court case problems in relation to the Nicholas Fisher and the back tax issue, then the accountancy inconsistencies era, and they basically made him an offer to buy the team and sort of help him with his legal battle and promote him as being a positive force, which is why we've seen all of this propaganda on their website. So Heaton's a victim too. That's why I don't even mind Heaton coming out on Twitter and saying Richard Lewis only writes this stuff for clicks. I don't give a fuck. He's a victim too. All right. So that's the brand right there. Then why does the brand have extra value? The 87-0, right? This unstoppable team, the original Counter-Strike professionals. Who did that? It was those players. Those players are NIP. So I would like to say that if you're an NIP fan, as soon as they get cast to the 4 wins, which is happening, Forest and Freiburg go in one direction, Get Right goes in another direction, hopefully across the Atlantic. Exist goes in another direction. Maybe it's in a team with Pronax, who knows? And all of these players are basically broke apart. Alu could end up back in a finish line. Who knows where it's going? But the brand is meaningless at that point. The NIP brand is meaningless at that point. All you've got is a brand that is owned by a tech startup, a company, and that did their fucking damnedest to just ride it fucking for maximum profit, piss on the players that built that brand, and basically lie to the entire community. So I hope that nobody would call themselves a fan of that. Support those players. Do not support that fucking logo ever. It's meaningless.
Unless they get a new team that's super sick, in which case they can build it back up on their own grounds, which, was reasonable. But I agree. You should. Unfortunately, it's not really like one of the reasons why legacies like that exist in sports franchises is that the players that tend to have built it stay with them the whole career, and they've been really well treated, and they get retired and they get a job in the front office, and none of that shit's going to happen with the Snip team. So, I mean, I agree. It's kind of naive to think it's like a Manchester United or something.
Yeah, exactly. What are your thoughts overall about this, supposed part of the problem, being removed?
I mean, I think it's obviously good. I really do wonder if maybe 1 or 2 players will stay. I mean, players are just crazy on this sort of shit, It's like if you can convince them of something, they'll just buy it. So if one of them stays, it would be interesting. That certainly would at least give them some legacy at the franchise. If they want to keep it going as a team, I'm almost certain that someone will join. I mean, you saw people who joined SK. Ultimately, to players at least, they always do want to attach themselves to a bigger name. So I'm sure some not very good team would join. I doubt there'll ever be a world-class team there again, though, for obvious reasons, as we just cited. Not least because now, think about where NIP was in the early days of CSGO. There barely were any big orgs. Now we're almost overflowing with big orgs who don't even have elite level teams because there's not enough to go around. So it's true. It's probably the end for NIP as like a huge brand.
And of course, let's not forget, mainstream sports brands are now coming in. In fact, one of the things that I've heard, obviously, from my contacts over in TV land, is that this sounds so ridiculous, dude. But seriously, hear me out. That NBA players have been asking around, like, how can we own an esports organization?
Okay.
Like, can we? Like, it's going to become like, you've got the watch, you got the sports car, right? You got the wag in the stands watching your ball and shit. So what's next? Well, apparently, you've got your own brand. I don't know, fucking pasta sauce, all these endorsements. Your own type of sneaker. What's next? Well, maybe it's an esports organization. People are asking fucking questions about it, which I think is fucking unreal.
That'd be great, mate.
Mate, I would love it, dog.
Mate, I'd love it if on analysis desks I could just wreck like fucking Russell Westbrook because he'd bought let's think, what team would he buy? Probably some team like, let's just make it like Team Liquid or something, and then I'd make some sort of joke along the lines of like, oh look, Chuckle Westbrook, his team just bombed out in last place out of the major again, get wrecked. Just make some joke like that, like, they've never been they've never won the championship like you or some shit. It'd make it extra good for me.
Yeah, honestly, dude. So it's an exciting time. I'm telling you. Like, this is why I don't even feel bad about some of these traditional brands falling by the wayside. I think the best is yet to come. I think the players are going to reap the dividends, and I think that's super important. So one final point before we wrap up the show. Somebody asked me this on Twitter, so I think it's important I bring it to you, Thorin, the god of theory crafting in esports. So you'll like this. So someone tweeted at me. Guardian just dropped 40 against Fnatic today on Dust 2 in regulation time, 30 rounds, and they still lost. What can Na'Vi do to be the top? And I will add my own little spin on this. Is it time for simple? Duncan, over to you.
If it was up to me, I'd give it a try for sure. I mean, bear in mind, you're all thinking to yourself, wait a minute, steady on. They did make the final of the major. Yeah, they made the final of the major largely in part because NIP beat TSM. If TSM turned up normally, I don't think they'd have made the final. Secondly, they just finished last place at a line where fucking Conquest finished top 4. So Na'Vi have some issues right now. One of them, unfortunately, is Flamey, whose form seems to be very poor at the moment. Or maybe he's not in form. Maybe his role within the team just doesn't work as planned. Whatever it might be, something's going wrong within that team. So I do feel like they need some sort of change. And at the moment, there's not many options in that region. So I would give Simple a try if you could. I mean, obviously, like, as I say that, he's a wicked player, utter cretin as a human being, as far as we can tell. I mean, I've never seen any actual basis that as an actual person, a soul incarnate within the tangible material world, he's ever expressed anything approaching intelligence or some meaningful statement beyond the magic that he creates with a mouse.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's still lots of questions about, some of the scamming that's gone on that I don't think we ever got to the bottom to. I was trying to help one player get like a knife or something he was due, and he just said, "Oh, I'm so much of a fan of Simple. I'm just disappointed. Don't make a big deal about it." Like, all right, cool. So I agree with you, but I don't see who do you drop? You can't drop Edward, right?
I think it's got to be Flamey, unfortunately, because he's just not playing well enough in the last 3 months or so. He has the odd game where he's really good. Think of the lineup. It's true, Edward and Flamey would be the obvious. I mean, well, you want a crazy one, Richard? If Zeus isn't going to be the in-game leader, there we go. I mean, as an individual player, he's not super good. And remember, the whole point is he was the in-game leader. He was the mastermind before. So, I mean, if you really committed to that, they probably wouldn't because he's a veteran. But, I mean, you've got to take someone out.
Yeah, but Zeus is like, the avatar of the coach. Like, you see him, even though he's not the in-game leader, he still chews those motherfuckers up when things ain't good. And sometimes that can be really valuable.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess if you're right.
No, I mean, I agree on that sense. That's the reason why I've always said they should maybe try him, is because I always thought, in theory, if you have Starix and you have Zeus, who are like two different ends of the approach. Like Starix is like quite a calm guy, but he's just the sort of guy where he doesn't take any shit. The two ends of the approach to coaching, I hope, could corral Simple, or at least make him realize, like, listen, bucko, this is like your one chance you're going to get for the next 2 years. Like, fucking, don't be a moron. I mean, he obviously wouldn't understand that, would he? Just don't be a moron and do what we say, and you might actually be able to accomplish something.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know, but I mean, I know his ban is getting lifted in January. It's going to be very interesting, actually, because...
Well, here's the thing, Richard. I've figured out what we do. Here's what you do. So the main problem is, it's true, in-game he does beef with people, but in-game he's so good you can forget about it, right? So it tends to be outside of the game. It's after a game, he'll say something stupid to a teammate, or he'll say something stupid on Twitter or in an interview about them on Russian Facebook VK, where I'm going to be messaging my colleague's ex-girlfriend later. He'll say all this shit like that, but that's the main problem. If we could just shut him up outside of the game, he'd have a chance. So my plan is, in the movie Pulp Fiction, released in 1994, Oscar-winning movie, there's a scene where they bring out a gimp from underground out of a little trapdoor. I propose a similar area be built within the Na'Vi team house, where we keep Simple locked up in a gimp mask for the whole time, and then when it comes time to play, we say, bring out the Gimple, and then Simple comes out and we unzip his mouth, and then he can play the game, and afterwards we zip him up, chain him up, and throw him back down there.
So did you just use the term Gimple? Did that just happen?
Yeah, that's what they would say when they brought him out.
Fucking hell, Duncan, mate. Your brain. It's just, you can't put things, that's going to be a thing now. Someone's going to Photoshop like...
Hashtag new Gimple.
Someone's going to Photoshop like Simple's lips underneath the gimp mask. And yeah, hashtag new Gimple's going to happen now, mate. Look what you've done. The chat's already embracing it. Oh my fucking God, man. You got to be careful. With great power comes great responsibility, brother. That's what Freakazoid would tell you. So anyway, I guess we can wrap it up there. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Duncan? Have we done it all? Have we gone all about? We covered all of the big news today on this most glorious of days.
Yeah, I think we've covered it all, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit about IEM Katowice, but I didn't want to trigger you, so we'll just leave it. So any final thoughts then?
Well, let's discuss that on the next episode, because there's obviously a discussion we can have there on whether that will actually be a major or not. So maybe we can discuss that. We can tease that for the next episode.
Okay, good. But final thoughts then before I do the wrap up. Oh, in fact, actually, go on then. I'll because you do the Alphadraft plugs way better than me. So I'll just say, obviously, thanks to you for a great show. Thanks to Sam for producing this show on this new technology. You will notice we haven't had pixelated cameras and we haven't had tech problems apart from that one tech problem that we did have. I think we're going to do it this way from now on. It's much better. Obviously, as well, big thanks to Alphadraft who make this possible by paying us the sick Skrilla, as Duncan would say. And as I've said multiple times, if you enjoy this podcast, what you need to do is thank Alphadraft by basically, signing up to their website, maybe playing a few games. You don't need to put any money down. The thing is, though, they completely allow us to run riot here. They let us just go nuts, do whatever type of show we want, say the things we want to say, the things we think you need to hear. So what you want to do is basically say thank you for basically taking Duncan off the chain, which not many companies are doing, not in an MTG universe, it seems, anyway. So, and no, we're not going to get into the FPL drama because I think I'm going to be doing the Face It Pro League desk tomorrow. So, yeah. Maybe I'll talk about it on air and never get hired by Face It again. And my world just grows smaller. Anyway, Duncan, over to you for the official Alphadraft plug.
Well, I mean, if you don't want that scenario to occur that we talked about on the show, where the evil empire of ESL, backed by MTG, actually takes over the whole industry and crushes our pitiful band of Bandits or whatever it was, or Friends or whatever that line was, and makes their DreamHack MTG style Death Star fully operational, then you should probably support Alphadraft, who not only provide a great fantasy draft service, but in many ways support and maintain the spirit of the Rebel Alliance, which is the package, aka Richie Lou and Duncan Shields, which is Thorin and Rich Lewis. And play there if you want to. If you don't, then fuck off. Just go join ESL or something. Bye.
I like it, mate. Great wrap up. I'm going to be doing trash talk in about 30 minutes. Hopefully see some of you guys there. But from us now, and by the numbers, have a good weekend. And until then, may all your drafts be alpha. Peace out.